The purpose of this video is to walk you through what the implementation of Grade 7 Phase 1 could look like in your classroom. This is completely optional. Use it as you wish. Take what you want, leave what you don't want, start from scratch. It is just a suggestion. So when you go to the new curriculum website for Chinooks Edge, at the top, make sure you are on Grade 7, and then find Math, and then click Phase 1 Lessons. Please remember at the time of this recording that this is based on the field testing curriculum. We have been waiting for the draft curriculum to be implemented and then eventually the full curriculum to be implemented. So there might be some changes from when you watch this video to what we actually used for a curriculum. So go ahead and click on Phase 1 Lessons. When you do that, you'll start on the page that has the outcomes from Phase 1. So as a refresher, Phase 1 is squares, square roots, proportional reasoning, multiplication and division of positive fractions, and decimals. Learner Outcome 3 from number, students interpret perfect squares and perfect cubes, but perfect cubes is crossed out. You are only focusing on perfect squares and square roots. So in this case, only the CUSP, the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures from perfect squares is included in here. Perfect cubes was removed because it will be done in Phase 2. All of these are highlighted in yellow, which means these are all outcomes that are new to Grade 7 or they weren't previously explicitly stated in the old curriculum. The next outcome that is embedded within Phase 1 is Outcome 5 from number. Students analyze multiplicative relationships between equivalent ratios, but it says in brackets, you're only focusing on percent of a number. So all of these CUSPs are crossed out because ratios will be dealt with in a later phase. You will notice that some of these are not crossed out, even though everything else in the CUSP is crossed out. That's because these are written using Equation Editor. An Equation Editor won't allow you to cross them out. So if you see a CUSP that is crossed out everything except the equation really is crossed out. So in this case, the pieces that are not crossed out is anything related to understanding percentage of numbers. So benchmarks of numbers, percentages less than 1%, percentages greater than 100%, and so on. And it is mainly focused on percent increase, decrease, not on the other pieces of it. And you're only finding percentages of natural numbers. The next outcome connected within Phase 1 is Outcome 4 from numbers. Students interpret multiplication and division of positive fractions and of positive decimal numbers. And it says full, so you know that you're addressing all of the CUSPs in here. Please keep in mind that when you see these little lines here, that means if you were looking at the program of studies, you would see multiple rows of CUSPs. This first part that I've highlighted is the first row of CUSP, and those are all interconnected. And then the next section is the next row of CUSP, and those ones are interconnected. And then you have a third row of CUSP, and you have a fourth row of CUSP. Sometimes what happens is that the CUSP will state something in one row that sometimes we might think applies to a different row, and it doesn't necessarily apply. On the left-hand side, if you don't see the menu show up like I have here, then just click on, in this case it says 24 because there are 24 tabs within this document. So just go ahead and click to show the tabs and the outlines. I included in this case for Phase 1, I included just the non-crossed out, for the most part except for unit rates here, the non-crossed out CUSPs so that you can see them cleanly. But I wanted to include all of the outcomes in their entirety for Phase 1, just so you are aware that there are pieces for that outcome that might not be addressed in this phase. Vocabulary, these are all of the key words that students need to know and use within this particular phase. So in 7N3, all of the words are red, which means they are super important for students to know and understand and be able to explain. And then some of them, like radical sign, those are bolded because it It's the first time they're hearing that word, whereas area is not bolded because they've heard that in an earlier grade. Radical, product, power, they all have asterisks at the end. That's so you know that they're a tier 2 word. Depending on the context, it has a different meaning. So in particular for our students who are learning language as an additional language, we really need to help students understand the difference between power as it relates to math and as it relates to other situations. If it is underlined, that means that you can click on that and you will find a link to a resource that helps you understand what that means. Okay, let's start with lesson 0. And this says this is a warm-up, so it doesn't follow the same structure as the rest of the lessons. This one is the locker game warm-up that you may have heard as a puzzle elsewhere. And this looks like a student handout because it is a student handout. And at the end of that, it gives you for the teacher, where did I get this from? And what do you need to know? What's the solution? And so on, so that you can give this to students to help them get their brains thinking about different things in relation to this phase. So it's an optional idea. All of these are optional, but this is definitely an optional one, but it is a great first lesson of the year where students can just play with math. Lesson 1, dividing into squares investigation. So you will notice that I have an acknowledgement at the top that I have found this on Joanne Sanford's math website. I've linked the video where she explains the activity and the handout here, and you'll notice it says recreated here with permission. So I reached out to her. She's provided permission for us to put this in our phase. Here's the learning outcome. So this part will always tell you what outcome this is connected to, even if it's not the full outcome that it's addressing, because many of these are only addressing part of the outcome. It will just tell you what that outcome is so you have that idea. Building on prior knowledge, this will always give you a couple ideas of what this lesson is relying on students coming in with. So in this case, kids need to understand the difference between a square and a rectangle, even though that's also addressed within this lesson. They have to understand area, they have to understand multiplication, and they have to have a basic understanding of factors of numbers. They don't have to have them all memorized, they just have to have an understanding of it. Building towards next steps. Where is this lesson going? Is it going somewhere within this phase or a different phase within this grade? Or is it maybe something they're building towards in a later grade? So there will be some ideas there of why this lesson and what is it building towards. Lesson goals. This is what is the purpose of this lesson? What are you hoping to achieve by the end of this lesson? Key vocabulary, some of the words that students will need to know. So most of the time they'll be from that vocabulary list that I showed you, but sometimes there'll be other words as well. Materials or manipulatives. So if there's a handout, the handout is either linked or the handout might be at the bottom of this lesson. So if it's linked, it's somewhere else, but if it's not linked, it means it's within that tab. There will always be a lesson launch. So a lesson launch is meant to be short. It is meant to get their brains thinking. It might be the first little bit of the lesson, or it might be something completely unique, but helps you with the next step. So it is not meant to be super long. Then you'll have a guided exploration. This is the meat of the lesson. So like I said, it might build upon the lesson launch. It might be just the natural next step, or it might be unique, but it will walk you through what you need to do in this lesson. Sometimes there will be pictures, sometimes there will be specific handouts, or it might be another slideshow or something like that you need. But everything will be in there. It will often say this, and in quotes, that's something you would say to students. It might say, ask this. It might say, do this. It might say, ask guiding questions. Anything in brackets is typically the answer for that one, the typical response from a student, if it's the correct response. I won't put in misconceptions in there. In the brackets, it will always be the correct response. In this case, you'll see first image on right, so it's trying to give you an idea of where to look in order to understand what the lesson is explaining. Below that, you'll have anticipated misconceptions. So you've done this lesson. What are some things you need to watch out for? So what do you need to make kids aware of? What might you need to address? And things like that. This particular lesson has one possible answer key for the lesson. This won't be the case in any of the other lessons. This one's kind of unique, but there's an answer key for you there. There are some other aspects that every other lesson will include. So let's take a look at another lesson. So this is lesson 2. In this case, this is based on what makes a square. So this is for Learner Outcome 3 as well. And in this case, I put the cusp in here. I don't always do that, but I wanted to make sure it was clear what things you were focusing on from this outcome and what you definitely were not. So you can see what's been crossed out. There's that building on prior knowledge again, building towards, lesson goals, key vocabulary, materials, the lesson launch and the guided exploration. And now we actually have some practice questions or application questions. So these are questions you can have students do together with a partner. You can have them do it individually on their own, but in class so that they've got some work to do, or you might even have them do it outside of class. But my preference is to have them do these with students because they're with a partner because they're still learning. If they're doing it outside of class as homework, then you don't know who's doing it. You can't help them if they are struggling or have a misconception. So my preference is to do this in class with partners. Then you will have your a synthesis. And synthesis could be some large group conversation questions or things you just really want students to walk away knowing. So it depends on the lesson, the way that goes. There's those anticipated misconceptions again that I showed you earlier. And then there's an exit slip in almost all of the lessons. So this one says provide students with the exit slip. So if you're like, where's the exit slip? Just scroll down. There's the exit slip that you could hand out to students to do as they walk away in class. You could have them do it as part of practice as well, but don't do it until they've had the chance to do the practice questions and to have that synthesis conversation. So then the exit slip can be done at that point in time. And in this case, I've got what this reveals portion, but you won't always have that. So for lesson 3, finding the side length of a square, you can see you've got those same commonalities for the structure of a lesson. It has everything in there. And then when you scroll down, you will see the handouts required as you work on those lessons. And then there's an exit slip that you can use as well. So I'm not going to go through all of the lessons here. I just wanted to give you an idea of the structure of the lessons. You can just kind of go through these lessons. There are 15 lessons here, plus the warm-up lesson. Then you'll see some puzzlers. I left some, in this particular phase, I left some puzzlers in here that you could use as you see fit. If you have some extra time and whatnot, that would be really good for this particular phase. Then you will see assessment, random here, and these are just assessment questions. So these are a collection of questions that you could use to create an assessment package for your students. So they could be a formative assessment. You could use them as part of your summative assessment. So there are, in this particular phase, a ton of extra questions that you can pull in. Not all phases will have this many questions. I did use Gemini and ChatGPT to help generate a bunch of questions so that you felt like you could start off with a bunch. Ignore copy to be placed. These are extra resources that you could use if you wanted. Again, not all phases will include these ones here, but they were extra pieces that I didn't want to lose that I thought you might find helpful. Use them if you so choose. And then the very bottom one is print all, so that it is all of these tabs put into one document, into one tab, so that you can scroll down and just find them all in one spot. So use that as you wish. If the reason I did that is because if, let's say, you're on the Outcomes tab, you could go File and then choose Print, and you can print just this tab or you can print all tabs. Just be aware, if you choose Print All Tabs, you can. It will create a little cover page for each tab with the tab name on there. So that's an easy way to be able to print all your tabs without going to this one as well. It will just use extra pages. So I hope you found that helpful. Phase 1 is done. Phase 2 and on, this does not exist. So just keep that in mind for the rest of the phases. Phase 1 was created for you in order to move forward. So hopefully you found this video helpful.